Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me. It's Friday, and welcome. Welcome to Friday. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm recording a little earlier than I typically do today because I'm in the zone, and I wanted to talk about, I just finished my meetings, my AA meetings, and I was inspired to continue the conversation about yesterday. Um, I was talking about step one in stroke recovery, and what it boiled down in the end is to is how I can be aware that there's a problem, but until I accept it, truly accept that I have a problem, um, I'm not going to do anything about it, if I don't accept that. So, what I was talking about yesterday is while referencing practicing step one, in AA, I was referencing that and showing for me how there is this undeniable parallel between AA, practicing step one in AA, and practicing step one for my stroke recovery. And I'm not making this up. This is what happened for me. And this is what my book is about because it has been overwhelmingly obvious to me that I can practice the steps of my sobriety for stroke recovery. So it's it's important to me to translate that verbally, and it's helpful to me to put it into words because I've been doing it, and I've been trying to talk about it over these years in the podcast, but I haven't actually plotted it out. And so I'm doing that in my book, and I'm trying to do that right now in my podcast episodes, at least step one. I was compelled to do step one at least. So what I want to talk about today is building a psychological immune system. This is a term that I heard somewhere. I have it written in my Remarkable. I don't know where I heard it. I don't know if it was in a meeting or on TV. I have no idea, but I heard it somewhere. Sometimes I can't remember where I hear things as easily because I'm not looking at anything that I'm listening to. So I don't have that natural visual recall of whatever it is that I'm trying to remember. So it's funny, I've noticed that I have a harder time remembering where I heard something. So that's neither here nor there. So first of all, what is the psychological immune system? And I wherever I heard this term, I didn't hear it defined. I didn't hear anything more than just that phrase, psychological immune system. So what I want to talk about is what it means to me. Like it really stood out as something that happens over the course of practicing the steps in sobriety. And it's something that I have been building on in stroke recovery. And I feel like step one is that introduction to just my psychological awareness, and and then we build on it. So psychological immune system for me is the internal skills that help us absorb shock, adapt to loss, and recover without being self-destructive like I was for so many years. And in stroke recovery, I have seen a similar self-destructive thought process. Um, when I was feeling very much like I could not see a future for myself. That's what was happening when before I got sober. I could not see a future for myself. I was just slowly self-imploding. I was killing myself. In stroke recovery, I I had a hard time envisioning how my life was going to continue with the limitations that my stroke gave me. So comparing the psychological immune system to the physical immune system, it the immune system does not prevent us from getting sick. It helps us to survive it. So a psychological immune system isn't going to prevent me from getting hurt, prevent me from being sad and feeling all the feelings. But a psychological immune system helps me to survive it. So step one is like that activation point for this system. Um, so step one, we are realizing that we're powerless and our life has become unmanageable. Um, Powerless does not, and I encourage you to think about this wherever you're coming from. If you're coming from a life of recovery from alcoholism, or if you're coming from a life of recovery from stroke, vestibular disorder, whatever it is, wherever you're at, I encourage you to try to apply what I'm saying to where you're at. So we get to the point where like I'm at a crossroads and something has to change or nothing's going to change. And that's where step one is. That's where the activation point is. And so realizing I'm powerless does not mean that I'm helpless, even though it feels like that. Helplessness is is simply the feeling of looking inward and not being willing to look outward for help. So that's where I was in both cases in my journey with alcoholism and the beginning of stroke recovery was I was in denial for 2 years, not willing to accept that my stroke had changed my life. As with alcoholism, I wasn't willing to accept that I had this fatal disease. And I felt helpless. But when I finally sat down and I waved my white flag, that's when I realized I wasn't helpless. I was powerless. And that feels like helplessness. Um, I realized that my life had become unmanageable. I could not keep walking forward with physical the physical stuff I was dealing with. So that denial, um, it it simply wore down my immune system. So when I was in denial with alcoholism, I was slowly killing myself. Like my liver was getting severely damaged. And in denial and stroke recovery, I was continuing. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. a frog in my throat. Um, my denial and stroke recovery caused me to continue to expose myself to pain triggering um, stimuli. So, naming that reality, that powerlessness, that unmanageability, that I can't go on like this. That's the first act of strength. I can't go on like this. And so that parallel of powerlessness, the illusion of control through trying to force my own willpower, like that's the cost of trying to push through. Um, in stroke recovery, I was I am powerless over my neurological injury. Um, there is an illusion of control, and it's the illusion is that I can still do the things that I used to be able to do if if I put in the effort. Well, I used to be able to do that. It's hard to erase that, the memory of being able to do something and now you can't do it. I mean, imagine folks who had a stroke and then they have severe aphasia. That memory of being able to talk effortlessly and then opening your mouth and being like, it doesn't come out is there's a cost to ignoring those limits. And for me, it the cost was physical because as I said yesterday, I feel like I broke myself by during that time of denial and I was ignoring my limits. It got worse. It got worse for me. And sorry. And in with my alcoholism, physically, I was getting worse as well. But psychologically, I was getting worse. In both conditions, when I was resisting the reality, my psyche was being damaged as well. And that damage, um, that that was breaking down my psychological well-being. And the steps is what has helped me um, build that immune system back up. For example, if somebody was mean to me when I was in early uh, sobriety, I would cry with the snap of a finger. Um, in early stroke recovery, if somebody was mean to me, and I'm saying that with quotes, if somebody said something that might have been hurtful or whatever, um, I would cry immediately. I couldn't handle it. Um, but the steps, practicing them, building that immune system up, now I'm able to handle things that used to baffle me, right? That's what the program says. That's what AA says. So, how does step one begin to build that psychological immunity? Um, Step one, when I stop resisting, it it reduces the internal conflict in my head. So I'm not arguing anymore with reality. I'm not resisting the reality that I had my stroke and it changed my life. So I spend less energy pretending that things are fine, and that gives me more energy to deal with the reality that I'm very, very sick. Same thing in alcoholism. I as soon as I stopped resisting, I I wasn't burning that energy trying to just tighten my fists. I think I talked about that in an episode before. Like I felt like I was just constantly clenching my fists and holding on to nothing. How much energy does that take to just continue to just squeeze your fists, but yet you're holding on to nothing? It's almost irritating. But that's what I was doing in my alcoholism and in stroke recovery before I actually became like self-aware. It took 2 years for me to do that, to notice what was really happening, to notice the fatigue and the triggers and my limitations, and recognize that if I keep pushing myself, I'm getting worse. I'm not getting better. And to admit that. So, step one, it also frees us from whatever shame might be involved with that admission. Um, Reframing what is happening to me as limitations rather than failures. Being able to say, I can no longer drink alcohol safely. That's not a failure, but it felt like one. And in stroke recovery, being able to say, I can no longer use digital devices safely without pain, for example, that's not a failure, but it felt like one. It felt like if I squeezed hard enough, I would be able to break through, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't change the pain. Um, so I needed to separate my identity from the circumstance, the condition. Like, I am still me. So I struggle, just side note, I hate doing side notes because I struggle getting back on track, but I struggle sometimes with the idea of quote unquote rebuilding an identity after stroke because I'm still the same person. I still have the same values and all of that good stuff. So what is the definition of identity? Um, I've tried to loosen my concept of identity and understand that identity is also how do I implement my values? And that part has had to change over the years. So, moving on, I'm going back on track. Practicing step one daily in stroke recovery. Um, I need to be able to accept, it all comes down to acceptance for me. I need to be able to accept that recovery is not linear and it's going to fluctuate on a daily basis. So I've mentioned so many times that I wake up and I remember, I have to like, this is how I come back from dreamland. You are a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. That's, I, that's That's part of my identity, I guess. No, that's not what I'm supposed to say. Our identity is our values and stuff. And the stroke survivor and alcoholism is the condition that I'm facing. Yeah. So that's exactly what I mean by my struggle with identity. Maybe I need to do an episode on what is our identity. So think about how that applies to you and how you look at what your identity is. Um, so I wake up in every morning and I remind myself, you're a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. Grateful being probably the most important word there. I need to then make decisions based on today's brain, not yesterday's brain, today's brain. Um, I need to respect my neurological limits. They are non-negotiable. And as I was talking about yesterday, it feels negotiable. And that's where the awareness is not the most important part. It's actually taking action based on the awareness of my limitations. So what I mean by making decisions based on today's brain and not yesterday's is every day when I wake up with that reminder, I have a different level of pain in my head. Some days I wake up and it feels like a massive hangover. Um, which is, I've always said that's like God's little joke on me. Here, we're going to give you a hangover every morning, but it's not from drinking now. Now it's from a stroke and you have a vestibular disorder. It's a sick joke. But I have to look at that. Where do I stand today? And it changes. Like when I first open my eyes and lift my head off of the pillow, sometimes it feels like I have a concussion. And then other days I'll open my eyes and I feel okay. That doesn't mean I don't have a headache. That's my norm. So I have to gauge like where am I at? But also remember that sometimes it takes a little while for things to settle, whatever it is that's happening in there, and that concussion feeling subsides. Other days, the concussion feeling doesn't subside. So this morning would be one of them. This morning, I have felt the concussion feeling up until now. So I got up at 7 and it's 9:45 and I still feel it. So if I'm making decisions based on today's brain, then that means I'm going to probably turn voiceover on today on my phone and not look at it at all because any any turn of my head or quick movement on my head feels massive. It feels like my head just was um hit against a wall or somebody came up to me and shook my head. Um, so I'm going to make those decisions and let rest be part of my strategy today. It doesn't mean that I am experiencing a setback. It just means that I need to be a little more gentle with myself today. So, what does this have to do with a psychological immune system? It means that every day I, because I'm practicing acceptance, and step one, I need to practice it every day. I need to practice acceptance every day. That's what that is when I'm saying, good morning, Rachel. You're a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. That is acceptance every day. And so when I do that, then I'm practicing, I'm practicing normalizing that, I guess, without having frustration. So I'm building up the psychological immune system to be able to say, what is hard for a normal person, you just raise the bar on acceptance. You raise the bar on what you can handle by waking up every day and accepting difficult stuff. That's what building the psychological immune system is for me. So if I raise my psychological immune system, then even harder stuff, having to deal with life, sorry, getting to deal with life with a disability, I can still handle it because my psychological immune system is stronger. That's something to be proud of. Um, Acceptance, it feels like it's the starting point, and it's not. Well, it's a starting point, but it's also the outcome. Acceptance is a daily process. It's ongoing. It's cooperation with reality. So step one clears away the fog of frustration so that acceptance can take hold on a daily basis. Acceptance. These are big words in this episode today. Acceptance strengthens my psychological immune system, and that reduces the chronic stress that is a result of having chronic pain, being disabled, um, and maybe a little of that shame that wants to come through, that failure, that feeling of failure, that like self-blame that wants to come through. It does every day. I get to look at it and I get to say, this isn't your fault. This isn't your fault. And accept. Man, acceptance is such a big deal. So step one is, like I said, it's not the starting point. It's a daily practice. It becomes a way of listening to my brain instead of battling it. So just like in my alcoholism, I needed to listen to, are you feeling like you're craving? If you are, this is what you need to do. You need to call your sponsor. You need to go to a meeting. So that's what step one, the role of step one in my sobriety. In strokes recovery, it's, it's listening to my brain instead of resisting, instead of fighting it, instead of saying, yeah, I know you're in pain, but I want to do this and I want to do it now, right? I mean, that's just like drinking. Um, yes, I know you're craving and you want to drink and you want to drink now, but, right? But this is what is going to lead to a healthier and happier life. So acceptance becomes a stable ground where I can heal, I can adapt to my disability, and I can even allow joy to resurface in my life. Um, So step one in stroke recovery is choosing to be present with my disability, choosing reality over resistance. The resistance is just hammering at my psychological immune system. It's breaking it down until I crack. So acceptance, it's not giving up. It's not saying like the fight is over. Now you just have to sit in bed all the time and sleep. It's it's saying, okay, now you understand what the present looks like for you. I'm not living in the past and looking back at, well, you used to be able to watch TV. You used to be able to go running. You used to be able to drive, and instead it's like, this is what reality looks like for me now. Let's figure out how I can adapt to it. And that's worth fighting for. Like that's where the fight, where the rubber meets the road. And I'm actually making an impact building that psychological immune system. So that's what step one looks like for me in stroke recovery. And it's been life changing for me to be able to have my AA program as a resource for stroke recovery. And if you are recovering from something that's not alcoholism or addiction, I encourage you to try to think this through and apply these things that I'm saying have worked for me. I think it's good to stop there. So thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.